Well, the death of Fidel Castro is a somber time for many Cubans, but for many Cuban-Americans, the news was cause for celebration. People poured into the streets of Miami's Little Havana neighborhood last night, banging pots and pans while celebrating the death of the Cuban dictator. David Begnaud is in Miami, in the heart of Little Havana. David, what's the scene there?
Well, Rena, it's something of a block party. It's a street celebration, if you will. Take a look down the street. We are on Southwest 8th Street, right at 36th Avenue. It's essentially the heart of Little Havana, and the crowd is assembled right in front of the very famous Cafe Versailles. This is a place where most people would come and get their Cuban espresso and talk about the news. Well, last night they didn't wait to come and talk about the news and get their coffee this morning. They showed up at around midnight and poured into the street. The police shut down the street, as they have again this afternoon, and for more than 4 and 5 hours, people banged on pots and pans and drums and cheered. You know, you may think it's somewhat bizarre to celebrate the death of someone who has died, another human being, but when you talk to these people, their visceral disgust when you bring up the name Fidel Castro is palpable. As we walk through the crowd a little bit, this man right here with the camo flag, with the camo hat on, he was taken as a political prisoner in Cuba, something, if you will, of a celebrity here on the street. There are other people who are walking around who are political prisoners and exiles who are here. We're seeing different generations. We're seeing grandmothers who were born in Cuba and came here when they were a child, actually bringing their young grandchildren who don't know much about Fidel Castro, but the grandmother wanted to have the granddaughter here so that she could learn something of a life lesson. Speaking of life lessons, I want to bring in Oscar Mignoso. He is an ophthalmologist here, and his office is actually right across the street from Cafe Versailles. You walked up to me a short time ago and you had this sparkle in your eye, and you said, did you think about something? And you told me what?
I said that I found it ironic that Castro dies on Black Friday, which is probably the most emblematic day for capitalism and opportunity that the Western world knows. And it's just ironic that someone that reflects tyranny to the nth degree would have died on a day like that.
Your parents left Cuba before you were born.
Yes.
Your mom and dad went to Spain. I wonder what the call was like this morning when you first spoke with your mother and you discussed his death.
It was very emotional. My mother initially couldn't speak because she was crying. And when she finally was able to get words out, it was, now hopefully you'll have an opportunity. Now hopefully your generation and the generations after you will have an opportunity. For her and for my father and for their generation, they feel it's as if this is one of the few victories they could have had over Castro's Cuba, was essentially to have outlasted Castro. It's sad, but that is really how a lot of that generation feel.
How old are you?
I'm 55.
Have you been to Cuba?
Never been to Cuba.
Would you want to go?
I'd love to go to Cuba, but I'd love to go to a free Cuba.
You won't go now?
No, I won't go now. For us, it was, when we left Cuba, when my family left Cuba, there was a feeling that if you do anything that brings money or assistance or sustenance to the regime, that the regime will use it not to help its people, but to maintain itself in power.
So if you were to go to Cuba now, would you see it as something of a disrespect to your parents?
I think that to my parents, yes, but there are a lot of Cubans that have come more recently from Cuba, and they have existent ties with Cuba, and they have different feelings. Everybody follows their own philosophy. For us, there will be a time to go, there'll be an opportunity to go, and that'll come hopefully soon enough.
Oscar, there's something of a generational gap in the younger generation thinking, you know, the embargo wasn't doing much to help us or them, so not going and just continuing to boycott them doesn't really help the situation either. What do you say to the younger amongst us? You have kids who are both younger than 15. If they were to come to you one day and say, Dad, I want to go. I want to go because it's important to me. Would you understand that generational gap that says maybe we need to take a new approach?
Yes, but I would understand that, but at the same time I think that they're going to have the opportunity to view Cuba as just another place in the world and not necessarily as a place where tyranny reigns and where oppression reigns. Hopefully they're young enough so that they'll look back on the life, on the world that I've lived, and they'll say that that was absurd, that that was the case.
My thanks to you. My thanks to you for your time. Another look as we are, I want to, the mayor of Miami is actually here. His name is Tomas Regalado, and the mayor himself has something of an interesting story. His father was a journalist in Cuba who was jailed for 22 years. And so when the mayor showed up here this morning, I could tell that this was something of a personal story for him. Mr. Mayor, David Begnaud with CBS News. We're live on the air, sir. I was just telling our viewers, this is something of a personal story for you because your father, a journalist in Cuba, was jailed for more than 22 years. Aside from being the mayor and walking the streets to talk to the people as a politician and an elected official, what is this like for Tomas Regalado, the 68-year-old man who was born there and came here?
Well, for me, it's a happy day, but it's also a sad day because my father died in exile without seeing the ending. And you know, many of these people are coming here to march on behalf of their parents, on behalf of their grandparents that couldn't see the end of the dictatorship in Cuba. And I think that that's important because it shows that from generation to generation, the wounds have not healed yet. And for me, when I heard the news, I remember my father, that he was also a person that was one of these people's parents and grandparents that said, I don't want to die until I see Fidel gone. He couldn't, but now he's in heaven.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. And the mayor has made it clear to the people here who are celebrating, stay as long as you want. If you close down the street, as long as you're peaceful, no problem. Rena?
The View from Florida, generations affected from one man's rule. David Begnaud, thank you.